But now we have David Greelish with the development of the third tier of personal computing. Thanks, David.
Thanks. And more. So my title is Some General Computer History and the Evolution, De-Evolution, Establishment of the Third Tier in Personal Computing. So I'm David Greelish, and my main site is classiccomputing.com, where I sometimes blog and I produce audio and video podcasts, and I've done a few interviews too. And my main podcasting vehicle is along with Carrington Vanston and Earl Evans on the Retro Computing Roundtable. So first, I want to start off by establishing my Apple II credentials. So I attended the Vintage Computer Festival in California at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View in 2006. And it was Apple's 30th anniversary, so Woz was there, some of the early Apple founders, starters, whatever. So this is him signing my Replica 1, which I brought along too. Him signing my copy of iWoz.
All right.
So I'm a big fan of Apple. I may not have as much history in the Apple II specifically, but love Woz. So now I just want to play something. This is just a quick and fun, interesting commercial from 1993 that I like to start off with.
Have you ever borrowed a book from thousands of miles away, across the country?
You all remember this?
Yep. Without stopping for directions?
Pay attention to
Or
this
send
device.
someone a fax from the beach? You will. And the company that'll bring it to
I use
you,
fax from the beach as well.
AT&T.
So now moving along, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and my computer history. So the first personal computer I ever really used was an Apple II Plus, and it was in college with 2 drives just like that. But it was not the first computer I ever owned. So I actually had a Commodore 64. I got it very late in its run, so like 1986. And all I ever owned was the computer. I never had a disk drive or display, cassette, anything, so all I could do is kind of plug it in and type on BASIC and leave it on for days at a time. So I never really got to play any games or do anything too much fun with it in that sense. So what I consider the first real computer I ever had was my Apple Lisa I acquired in late 1989. This is a Lisa 2, if you're not familiar with that. I bought mine from Sun Remarketing, and so it was actually a Mac that, it was a Lisa 2 that ran the MacWorks Plus, it was called. For all practical purposes, it was a Mac Plus, but it didn't have a sound chip. So anything that directly addressed sound like a Mac would, it would crash it. But it was great otherwise. And my background was in desktop publishing, so that's what I used. Let's see. Oh, one thing about the Lisa, so in me getting started in computer history, this was one of the sort of 3 catalysts that got me interested in the hobby. So I became fascinated with this machine, and then that turned into a fascination with Apple's history, Mac's history, then Apple's history, and then personal computer history, and so on. It kept growing. So a second influence was this TV show that Carrington will especially appreciate, some other Canadians, called Bits and Bytes. So shortly after I joined the Army, I had to do like mandatory training, if you will, go to the library on post and watch videos and stuff, and I chose this. And so it was like a fun thing for me to watch this because I was already interested in computer history. So someone has put this entire show now on YouTube, so you can watch it. I highly recommend it.
Was it a training program or interviews?
No, it was like a
Reviews?
it was a public television sort of thing, just introducing computers to people. And they had, Apple II and Commodore and Atari and TRS-80, and then, how's it work and how you use them and everything. So it's a great, computer history time capsule now.
And where can you find that show?
On YouTube, do a search for Bits and Bytes. And the very first one I put up, and then now someone's put them all up. So it's really great. So a third catalyst for me was this book called Hackers by Stephen Levy. That's a scan of my actual copy my brother gave me before I went off. I was in the Army, so before I deployed to Germany for my first duty station. So very influential, highly recommend it. And then I put up here some other books that were early ones for me that really just kept inspiring me to be interested in computer history. Bit by bit, Digital Daily, a little bit harder to come by. Actually, this one's online, I'm pretty sure now, about Atari archives. So moving along. So I was in the Army, I lived in Germany, I got married, other stuff going on in my life, but my interest in computer history I read as much as I could about it. I thought about, would it be kind of cool to maybe collect computers? I mean, no one's doing that. So I had an idea, in sort of late 1992, I was still in Germany, that maybe I would start a club, and maybe I could publish a newsletter and start collecting computers. I didn't think it was very practical until I was deployed back to the United States, though. So anyway, I came up with the name the Historical Computer Society, because I thought it sounded serious and professional. I wanted to grow into a legitimate organization, nonprofit, so one day. So that's me still in the Army. This is actually in El Paso, Texas, not in Germany. I have a picture of me there. That picture's from, 1993, I guess. So late 1992. Anyway, then we deployed back to, my last duty station was at Fort Bliss, El Paso, Texas, and I started the Historical Computer Society in April of 1993. Here's some pictures of me after I've lived there a while and started collecting computers. So here's like my Apple II Plus and the Osborne, and this is the original compact portable IBM PC down here with a big hard drive underneath it. This is an NEC APC, it's called, old Macintosh, Convergent Technologies work slate, which I still have. So I officially launched the club. A good thing I made notes. I officially launched the club. I started collecting computers regularly, and I started getting the word out about my club and this newsletter. And I was on CompuServe, so I used CompuServe and AOL classifieds, and then later on finally the internet. So what I started as the official voice of the group, primary communications tool, was this newsletter called Historically Brewed. And that's the first issue, which I did the whole thing, because I didn't have any contributors at that point. So this came out in August, it's the August-September issue, 1993. The name is a play on the term homebrew. Before you could buy computers, you had to homebrew a computer. You have a famous user group in California called Homebrew Computer Club. You know the story, right? Steve Jobs, who wasn't shut off the Apple I there. So that's that first issue. I'm not here to tell this whole story, so over time I did 9 of them. So here's the nine different ones. They got more and more professional, started doing 2-color covers. Steve Wayrich had a 3-part series on the beginnings of the Apple II. See, right here, these 3 issues are included. And they got pretty, pretty proud of it. They got pretty professional by this last one. I interviewed Ed Roberts, if anyone knows who he is, the creator of the MITS Altair. That was a pretty neat thing in that last issue. So moving along, I ultimately decided to change the name. I wanted to try to make it go more mainstream. So Classic Computing, instantly people would know what that is. So I changed the name to Classic Computing Zine or magazine, and I had the covers professionally printed at a print shop, and then I ran out of money, and it never happened. Everything stopped for 14, 15 years. So let's see. So just move on here. So basically, I can talk more about this later, but I published a book last year. I did a Kickstarter campaign. The Complete Historically Brewed contains, on all 9 issues of my newsletter. So I finally didn't get into people's hands again. I think it's still, all the stories are there. It's history. It doesn't get old. And then I also took that last, this is basically Historically Brewed 10, Classic Computing 1, and I finished it too, to go along with this. Now it's like a bundle that I sell. So I have these for sale. All right, so now we're going to move along. I'm going to try to keep this at 30 minutes, so I think we're doing good. So basically, I just want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about general computer history, which is basically broken down into 4 generations. And forgive me if you already know this, but the first generation is defined by the vacuum tube. And so on the left here, you have a close-up of one of the panels of the ENIAC. And everyone familiar with the ENIAC? It was meant to calculate anti-aircraft trajectories for World War II. It wasn't actually completed until 1946 after the war ended, but it was a huge success in any case. It had approximately 18,000 vacuum tubes. And when it was in operation, one would burn out approximately every 30 seconds. But they designed it in such a way so every one of these panels, could be pulled out and instantly they have another one ready to plug in, then later they can go find the bad tube, test it, do whatever. So here's another look at the ENIAC. It was not programmed in the sense of, you had to program the machine through wiring to make it do something, and then it did that for a while. On the right-hand side is so you had 2 gentlemen named Eckert and Mockley, who for the United States Army made this computer, and And then they went on to launch the first American Computer Corporation. And I always forget the name of that company, but basically it became UNIVAC, the name of the company. The first computer is the UNIVAC 1, which the United States Census Bureau purchased. So, all right, so then you have the second generation, which is defined by the transistor. And that's a reproduction of the transistor there, the very first one. And then on the right is what, from my research, I can tell is what's generally considered the first commercial, fully transistorized computer, the IBM 608 from 1957. And, you know, anytime that you see a picture like that, obviously that's not the entire computer. I mean, that's probably the main CPU and all that, but it's going to have other things that go along with it. I always add this slide. One of my favorite documentaries is something that came out 20 years ago called The Machine That Changed the World. I have a clip for it later. And you can watch that free online. It's really excellent. And they talk about a part in there after this second generation called the Tyranny of Numbers. And essentially, I wrote this down because I can say it better when I write it down. Basically what it was is that the transistor replaced the vacuum tube. And so it made a huge reduction in size and heat. And so ultimately, but ultimately it became an engineering nightmare, because even though it made a huge advancement in computer technology, people could theoretically design all kinds of crazy complex computers with transistors on paper, but there became a limitation of what was humanly possible to wire, and that's what's called the tyranny of numbers. So the computing industry kind of ran up against a wall, the transistor, because you have to wire every one of those things together. And this is actually a picture of a computer from the Computer History Museum. And then just another close-up of there's actually a bunch of capacitors and stuff in that other picture. Oh, you know what? Please ask questions if you like, anytime. So the third generation is defined by the integrated circuit, which again pushed the computer industry forward, in great leaps. So where you had individual transistors, now you can have hundreds, thousands of transistors on one little teeny chip. In the middle top there is an example of what's arguably the first mini computer, the Digital Equipment Corporation, the DEC PDP-8 from 1965. So that's referred to as the straight 8. There were different ones going forward. And this other one here to the right is the Data General Nova 3. So this is a much later example and a smaller example of a mini computer, 1975. So now we come to the current generation of computing. And it's defined by the microprocessor. So at the top there you have the Intel 8080, which launched the personal computer industry with the MITS Altair and MSI and some of those other S100 computers. And then this one's the 8080A. So this is what the first IBM PC had 16-bit. And of course the beloved Advanced Technology 6502, which the Apple II, Commodore, Atari used. There's kind of a misconception that people have that computers got smaller and smaller and smaller, and so it was only logical that the personal computer rose out of the constant downsizing of computers, and it didn't really, because they didn't use microprocessors. The personal computer rose out of hobbyists and this made personal computing possible. Here's some example of microcomputers that are called personal computers. So processor technology Sol, S100 computer. That's a SX64, just some random ones. A North Star Horizon, first IBM PC, and of course, we all know what that is. So now I have a short clip from that documentary.
Park in Silicon Valley, the electronics capital of the world. A revolution was underway. Every year, engineers vied with each other to stuff more and more electronic circuitry onto tiny wafers of silicon. Computers which once filled a room had been reduced to the size of a refrigerator. And in 1971, the silicon wizards went a step further, putting the main circuitry of a computer on a chip. A chip which could be mass-produced. A microprocessor had the power to totally change the economics of computing. Computers need no longer be priceless objects. Microprocessors, if mass-produced, could become cheap enough to be disposable.
I have one case where I was being interviewed by somebody from a magazine who kept asking questions about testing. But I realized after this questioning went on for a while that they weren't really talking about testing, they were talking about repair. And they had the idea that somehow somebody was going to have to take their soldering iron and go down inside the chip and try to move wires around. And then once I realized what they were really asking, I said, oh no, it's not like that at all. It's like a light bulb. When it burns out, you unplug it and you throw it in the garbage and plug in a new one. And they were just dumbfounded at the idea that a computer could be so inexpensive you'd think about throwing it away.
But in the mid-70s, corporate giants like IBM were not convinced that ordinary people would ever want to buy computers, even if they were small and cheap. Seemingly unaware of the brilliant work of Xerox PARC, they saw their customers as scientific and business institutions. There was a group of technical people on the fringes of the computer establishment, however, who desperately wanted their own computers. Technical hobbyists who had used computers at universities and knew their remarkable versatility. Before the microprocessor, their dreams seemed absurd. Now, perhaps, things would change. In January 1975, the front cover of Popular Electronics featured a computer kit called the Altair for less than $500. The Altair had to be assembled by hand, but at its heart was a microprocessor. If people did want to own a computer, here finally was an opportunity. An opportunity, it turned out, that thousands of people had been waiting for.
And what happened was all this pent-up demand, a sort of latent understanding everybody had what computers could do, suddenly was allowed to burst forth. People drove all night to get their computer kits. And why do people read the Popular Mechanics magazines? Because they dream of all the things they could do if. And suddenly here was a new if. If only I had this computer, I could keep track of everything, I could learn everything, I could be creative in every possible way. And so it began.
For technical hobbyists, it was a dream come true. Now they could have their own computer. Clubs of enthusiasts grew up all over America, like the Homebrew Computer Club in San Francisco, where members showed off what their homebrewed computers could do. From these modest beginnings came a series of startup companies selling parts for the Altair, and soon, whole computers. By 1976, there were enough of them to hold a convention in Atlantic City. Off in a corner of the convention hall were a group of raggedy-looking guys selling circuit boards. Two of them would become synonymous with a personal computer, Steve Jobs and Stephen Wozniak.
I can watch the whole thing, but better not. So, you know, on those Altiers and S100 machines, about a third of the case is power supply. That big fan, you know, it kicks on, sounds like a jet engine. So there's the first issue of Popular Electronics, well, the first one, the Altier, January 1975. And then here's an example of the original Altair, an 8800B, a later model. If you notice, this does not look like this. This was a mock-up of the actual prototype. The prototype was shipped on a railroad freight, which was a deal in 1975, to Popular Electronics magazine so they could take pictures of the inside and all that good stuff for the write-up, and it was lost forever. It's never been found. So Ed Roberts ultimately redesigned it and then, you know, got one off to him for the picture and all that stuff. And here's just another image of the Homebrew Computer Club, and which was held at, started in March 1975, was held at the Community Computer Center in Menlo Park, California, the greater San Francisco Bay.
Yeah,
and then
this
their first newsletter.
is SPAC, though.
What's that?
This is SPAC. Stanford Linear Accelerator is where this is.
Okay.
And that's where most of the history of
Is where that, like,
Homebrew
that
Club
room is?
is.
Okay.
Right.
Did I
The
get it wrong?
Oski Auditorium.
Maybe that might be the modern name of it now or something.
No, I mean, I go to a computer club meeting there every month.
Oh, okay. I'll double check that. I mean, I believe you. I'm not
Well,
arguing.
no, they may have started
What was called then, maybe, or something.
No, they may have started in another venue.
I got you, but the
But
picture
this is Panofsky Hall at Stanford Linear Accelerator.
Okay.
I've got some pictures. I think I've still got them on my computer. I made a presentation.
Oh, I can't change it while I'm
Last
presenting
year.
it. No, thank you. I don't
But I'll
want
bring you
to, I
some-
like to
some
say things what they
information.
are, you know, what the pictures are. So, all right, so moving along. I'm going to talk about something I call the 3 tiers of personal computing. So we learned about the basic, you know, computer history, the generations. So to start, we'll talk about first tier. So basically the first tier was the desktop personal computer. And these are 3 significant ones. I don't have to tell you about one. But all 3 of these were released in 1977. These are arguably the first consumer computers where, you know, regular people could go and buy a box and take it home and open the box and, you know, and hook it up and do something with it. So you had the TRS-80 Model 1, the Commodore PET, and then of course the Apple II. Can anyone tell me what order these were announced? Or this is where it gets a little gray, but I'll use the term were introduced in 1977. Anybody want to? Go ahead.
That's not fair, I got. Well, PET was announced at the January Consumer Electronics Show, but it didn't come out until June or something.
I think I maybe
July.
have dates when it actually shipped. It's maybe.
Yeah, the Apple II boards came out in May of '77, and then the complete systems in June. And the TRS-80, I think, was September, same year.
Well, you're close. This is what I have, is the Apple II actually gets credit as the first. So
Right.
April, and then October for the PET, and November for the TRS-80 Model 1. But you know, just these dates are get kind of, I think that's per Wikipedia.
Trouble is that announcement and shipping dates were 2 different things.
Right, right. And this is something I should work on my presentation. Because I did this information some time ago, so. I think this is what I found that they shipped, because that would kind of match what
No,
you
I think
said
that
close.
the Apple II shipped in, the system shipped in June, the boards
June.
shipped in May. So, but it was announced at the First West Coast Computer Fair in April.
All right, so maybe they're introductory. Sorry,
But Apple II still got it first.
go ahead.
I graduated high school in '76. I
Uh-huh.
remember '77 coming back and talking to my high school, and I consulted with them on which of these 3 to get. And they decided to wait another 2 years because it was just a horse race for them. They didn't want to buy into it until they understood which one would have the educational software they needed.
Sure. And being fair, I mean, even what we know of the Apple II, right away when it first came out, there's little you could really do with it, unless you knew how to start programming and stuff.
Right.
So the first tier, desktop computing. So now the second tier, which is basically portable computing, right? Makes sense, got desktops first. So portable computers were defined initially by what were kind of lovingly called luggables. And there's been some other ones before the Osborne, but generally speaking, the Osborne one in 1981 is generally considered the first commercially successful portable computer, luggable computer.
And luggable defined because at that time it would fit in an airline seat.
Exactly. That's why they were shaped this way as well, because you could travel with them. This is the compact portable one, just called compact portable. But so you can see it's the same sort of shape and stuff. But that started that company. Of course, what was very significant about this machine is this is the very first 100% IBM compatible. So that broke IBM's hold on that market, and the clone market rose up around it. So first you had what were called luggables, and then next basically laptops started to appear by the mid to late 1980s. And then of course we call them notebooks now too. And yeah, they look different now, and they're lighter, thinner, and smaller, and you know, you got GUIs, you have a trackpad, and so on. But generally speaking, what we use right now is not too far from that. So what was defined 25 years ago, we're still essentially using. So now the third tier. This is where it gets a little more interesting. There's been a struggle to define this third tier for probably about this 25 years or so. So first I'm going to point out to a couple of some failures, arguably. It doesn't mean there weren't some successes here, but these are what were called, you know, handhelds or pocket computers. The bottom left here you have the Atari portfolio, and that came out in 1989. Then the HP 95LX, which now both of those actually ran DOS, and the HP could run Lotus 123. And this one's a slightly later one, 1992, which is the Zeos Pocket PC. Anyone remember Zeos? Used to be all over Computer Shopper and stuff. But the reason I say, I mean, some of these sold pretty well, but not in any large numbers. And the reason they were sort of failures is they were in no way an alternative to, you know, a real computer, a desktop or a laptop. They didn't fulfill that, right now a desktop and laptop are equally built for the most part. And so this didn't fulfill a third tier that could do many of the same things. So next we move along to what was called the personal digital assistant. And you remember this from the Satisfaction Beach? And I have one. I would have loved to have brought it. I usually do bring it, but not when I have to fly on that room. Good old John Scully of Apple Computer coined the term PDA, Personal Digital Assistant. And of course, that's the original Apple Newton there from 1993. These are all from 1993, by the way. Actually, if you look into the history of the Knowledge Navigator, or the Newton, you know, it didn't really live up to what they had initially were designing and intending. They rushed it out because they felt like that was the future of Apple, the direction they wanted to go in. So, and pretty much these were failures. They didn't sell very well. They cost a lot of money. Let's see, I'll just tell you more about them. The middle one is a Tandy Zoomer made by Casio. Casio had another variation of it. It ran Zeos, or Geos rather, sorry. And then this is the AT-EO personal communicator, which ran the Pinpoint operating system, all pin computers. And you could actually put a cell phone on that one. It actually has a real handset sort of cell phone. So basically what happened is as there's a big push, and of course with the Newton, you know, it got really mocked in the media and stuff about handwriting recognition. That didn't help it very much, which arguably, by the 2.0 operating system, it was pretty decent. But, you know, it got lambasted by, what was the Doonesbury cartoon and other stuff. So really what happened to this third tier is it was just never really accepted as a third alternative to desktops or laptops. And so basically they sort of got humbled. And this category was defined by what are called organizers, with the most successful one being this, the Palm Pilot. So just real quick, that is a, like your Scion 3A, anyone remember that one? And then the middle is a Sharp Wizard from about 1994, and of course the original Palm Pilot. So actually I think this is when US Robotics bought it. Of course the first one was made by Palm and it was a Pilot. But this ultimately became the successful third tier, if you will, because it was very simple, smaller, light, cheap compared to like what it was or whatever. It did very few things, but it did them very well. You know, your contact list, your calendar, your appointments, and what am I missing? That's it, right? Dates, kind of. You didn't have a phone with it. One thing I used to sort of, when I did this presentation about the third tier, it's kind of evolved and stuff, I kind of used to say that, you know, it seemed logical that if you look at a magazine from about 1994, a Mac Week or something like that, you'll see that people, one of the biggest things they would say, I want on my Newton is a cell phone. Then I'd have everything on it. So it seemed logical the computer might become the phone one day. But actually it happened in reverse. So the phone ultimately became a real computer. Some people say that these were, or that one was the first smartphone. So this is what I call a potential third tier. The one on the left is by IBM and Bell South, called the Simon. Came out in 1984. It was really limited where you could get it. It was almost $1,000, so it was not a big success. And then it did not have any kind of email or any of that stuff. It just had a touch interface, and like it was a PDA phone. The middle one is arguably the first smartphone because they had internet capability. It's from 1996. It's the Nokia 9000 communicator. Very expensive, you know, limited. And then this was Trio's first smartphone. I don't even know if they were called that. Were they in 2002? I don't know if that we even had that term yet. I guess we might have by then. So this was a PDA phone, a Palm phone, but it had, you know, email and real basic web. So moving along then, what I define as what I feel is the true third tier where we are today was the introduction of the iPhone in 2007. And that's a big debate there. But the reason I say the iPhone, because It had a multi-touch, touch interface. It had a true desktop quality email client and web browser. So highly limited compared to laptop or desktop, but you could do those basic things on it that you could on this or on a desktop. And then of course later on you got third-party apps, so it's even more like a real computer, though arguably limited, right? You can't do everything on your iPad or iPhone, you can do it on your computer. And then of course basically you have Android and WebOS and some other ones. But it was a real, a real third-tier computer in most of any ways that mattered. Anybody have a comment or a question? Yes?
And this is the generation of stuff that's sold. I mean, the business redefined and generated a whole new environment to work in, right?
Yeah, in my opinion, yeah. I mean, absolutely right. The iPhone was groundbreaking and changed everything. So, because we had all, you haven't heard me mention the BlackBerry. The BlackBerry deserves tons of credit for, it absolutely was a great platform as an email client, but very poor in the web part of it and a lot of other ways. But so it was a smartphone, but not in what I call this third tier, of a real, true, full-on computer, handheld. So then how do we define, the iPad or laptops that are coming, tablets that are coming up? Are they, I kind of think they're extensions of the third tier. I don't know if I'd call them a fourth tier, but they're not phones, so they're not handheld. Just something to think about. And that's it. Anyone have any other questions?
What is the fourth tier?
I had a slide with that on it, then I took it away. I don't know. I just asked the question and have maybe a quick discussion. Do you have any ideas? I've debated whether the tablet market, is that somehow going to be a fourth tier? Maybe if it evolves more. Because, no disrespect to, I love my iPad, but it's kind of a big iPhone, right? So it is sort of limited in a lot of ways.
Google Glass.
Yeah, Google Glasses, because right now you're still requiring touch, right? We think of touch as cool.
Yeah.
But the next generation is no touch required.
Yeah. Can you imagine when you walk around and people are talking on their Bluetooth? Yeah, and you think, oh, maybe they're talking to me, oh, they're on their dumb Bluetooth. Can you imagine people are walking around with those things? Like, oh yeah, hey, they're walking around. Oh, go ahead.
When people ask me how I like my iPad, I say, well, it'll do it until I can get it surgically implanted.
So real quick, whoops. Let me mirror my display. So this is my website, classiccomputing.com. You can link off to RCR podcast or some of my other ones. But if you go down to the archives here, I have an article too, which goes a little more, oh, you know what? I think it was on the bottom there, wasn't it? Oh, here it is, third tier personal computing. So this article kind of is a little different than my talk, but it kind of goes into the whole discussion of the third tier and stuff too, which is pretty good. And if you're interested, I interviewed John Scully recently, and I've interviewed a few other people, and I wrote these articles about should Apple have a public venue and sort of museum at that new campus they're going to be building, and that. Pretty cool. I'd love to hear your comments if you have any about it. So any other questions? Go ahead.
I think the next generation, the only thing that's going to stop it is when people integrate whatever it is into their lives, they're going to be distracted by it as they try to do day-to-day things. First time someone's got the new Google Glass or something equivalent, wraps the car around the telephone pole, right? This society's going to have to figure out how to address stuff like that.
Yeah, because it is kind of intrusive in a lot of ways. And I love discussions of the future as much as I love the past, too.
I think it's
we've had some on the show.
Not so much intrusive, but distracting.
Yeah, it's a problem already. Earl?
That's what I was going to say. Haven't we already kind of begun to assimilate the technology? I mean, there was a lot of discussion, are cell phones too distracting?
Right.
Should people be talking on a cell phone in a public venue?
Well,
At some point, we got to kind of take it away from it.
Well, and society's already said you don't going to do that in the car unless there's certain
because of safety issues.
Right,
right.
Go ahead.
I like science fiction, and if you're interested in really interesting conception of the overlap of virtual and real world, read Rainbow's End by Bernard Vinge.
Oh.
And he has people wandering around wired And one of the things the kids have to do before they graduate is they have to go into a place that is not wired and survive for a while and actually accomplish something, just to prove that they can manage.
I thought you were going to mention the singularity at first, but. So what I was saying, so basically, this book was $27 and $5 for my zine, but I recently put it together as a combo package for $25.